Battle of Stamford Bridge, the Viking who almost took England. What happens when a betrayed brother teams up with a Viking warlord to invade England, only to be met by a king who just sprinted 190 miles in 4 days with an army of axe-wielding housecarls? Why did the mighty Harald Hardrada, a warrior who had fought in the icy north, Byzantine palaces, and the rivers of Rus, choose a sunny September day to march unarmored into a trap? This isn't just a battle. It's a collision of ambition, vengeance, and fate. From the rise of the Godwinsons to the fall of the last great Viking king, this is the story of Stamford Bridge, a moment that changed the course of history forever. So buckle up, because this tale has everything weller. Once upon a time, around 1116, a clever and ambitious noble named Godwin found himself in the right place at the right time. First a retainer to Athelstan, and then Edmund Ironside, Godwin switched allegiances faster than a squirrel dodging arrows. When King Nut the Great, yes, the one who tried to command the tide, defeated Ironside, Godwin became his right-hand man. Not just any sidekick, he married into the royal circle and was made Earl of Wessex, even acting as regent when Knut was off doing Viking things. By the time Knut died in 1035, Godwin was basically the medieval version of a corporate CEO with a monopoly on influence. He survived 3 royal successions like a political cockroach, unkillable and always adapting. In 1042, he backed the return of the native house of Wessex in the form of Edward the Confessor, a man so pious he probably blessed his breakfast. Godwin had big plans. He married his daughter Edith to Edward, hoping for a grandson to inherit the throne. But Edward, who had spent years in Normandy sipping wine and learning French manners, wasn't exactly thrilled about his new in-laws. Especially since Godwin had once handed Edward's brother Alfred over to Knut's son, who promptly blinded him. Not exactly the stuff of family reunions. Edward had lived in exile so long he probably forgot what English ale tasted like. He'd become thoroughly Normanized, even playing babysitter to young William of Normandy. Yes, that William. When Edward returned to rule England, he brought his Norman pals with him, including Robert of Jumièges, the first Norman Archbishop of Canterbury. This didn't sit well with the native nobility, especially Godwin. In 1051, tensions exploded. Edward tried to flex his royal muscles and booted Godwin and his family out. Rumor has it, Edward may have promised the throne to his cousin William during this time. But Godwin wasn't the kind of man to stay down. By 1052, he was back, restored, respected, and probably smirking. He died in 1053, mid-feast, possibly choking on his own triumph. Enter Harald, Godwin's son and successor. Unlike his father, Harald was less murdery and more diplomatic. He quickly became Edward's go-to guy and was made Earl of Wessex. His brothers Gyrth, Leofwine, and Tostig also climbed the ladder, with Tostig landing the prestigious earldom of Northumbria. But not everyone was clapping. Elfgar, son of Leofric of Mercia, wasn't thrilled about the Godwinson monopoly. When Tostig got Northumbria in 1055, Elfgar rebelled, teamed up with the Welsh king Gruffydd, and caused a ruckus. Though eventually pacified, the seeds of resentment were planted deep. By the early 1060s, the Godwinsons were basically running England. Harald even defeated Gruffydd in 1063 with Tostig's help. But power breeds enemies, and Edwin, Elfgar's son, was watching, waiting. Now pause for a sec. Join the front lines of history and power. Welcome to European Battle, where epic clashes, legendary warriors, and untold stories come alive. By subscribing and turning on notifications, you're not just joining a channel, you're stepping into a world of thrilling battles, strategic brilliance, and jaw-dropping historical drama. From ancient empires to modern warfare, we deliver cinematic storytelling, expert insights, and exclusive content that will leave you breathless. Why subscribe? Unlock premium battle breakdowns and rare historical footage. Be the first to witness new episodes and live events. Join a passionate community of history lovers and strategy minds. Fuel your curiosity with facts, theories, and fierce debates. Don't just watch history. Live it. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications to never miss a moment of the action. Your front row seat to Europe's greatest battles is just one click away. European Battle, where legends clash. 10 years into his rule as Earl of Northumbria, Tostig had managed to turn his earldom into a personal fiefdom of fear. He had opponents assassinated like it was a hobby, cozied up to Malcolm III of Scotland, a man who made border raids look like weekend getaways, and, just for fun, doubled the taxes. That's right, doubled. In Northumbria, where people already thought southern lords smelled funny. So in late 1065, while Tostig was off schmoozing with King Edward the Confessor, the northern lords said, enough. They seized York, killed Tostig's officials, and basically threw his rule into the nearest river. They didn't just rebel, they recruited. Their pick for a new earl? Morcar, younger brother of Earl Edwin of Mercia, a Godwinson rival. The plot thickens. Now Tostig wasn't just any disgraced noble, he was Harald Godwinson's brother and King Edward's brother-in-law. And of all the Godwinsons, Edward adored Tostig the most, probably because he didn't constantly remind him about that whole blinding Alfred thing. But love wasn't enough. The rebels marched south, and Harald was sent to negotiate. His options? Back Tostig and risk civil war. Accept Morcar and keep the peace, but betray his own brother. Harald chose peace. Tostig chose rage. He stormed off into exile, swearing vengeance and probably practicing dramatic monologues in his tent. Meanwhile, Edward, heartbroken and sickly, began to fade. By Christmas, he was terminally ill. Harald knew the wolves were circling, and they weren't just metaphorical. The year earlier, Harald had found himself in Normandy, possibly trying to free his relatives from captivity. Instead, he became the unwilling guest of Duke William, who was charming, ambitious, and not above a little coercion. Harald was forced to swear an oath to support William's claim to the English throne. Back in England, Harald probably treated that oath like a bad Tinder date, regrettable but not legally binding. On January 5, 1066, Edward died. Some say he pointed to Harald from his deathbed. Others say he mumbled something vague. Either way, Harald was crowned the very next day on January 6th, while Edward was still warm in the ground. But Harald knew the crown was heavy. William of Normandy, Sweyn of Denmark, and Harald Hardrada of Norway all had claims, some flimsy, some backed by armies. In May, Tostig launched his comeback tour. He assaulted the Isle of Wight, raided the south coast, and reached Sandwich. Harald marched to confront him, and Tostig fled, northward to Lincolnshire, where he clashed with Edwin and Morcar again. They drove him back into the sea like a bad smell. But Tostig wasn't done. He became a medieval influencer, visiting Flanders, Normandy, Denmark, and finally Norway, where he met the ultimate Viking, Harald Sigurdsson, aka Harald Hardrada. Harald was a war machine. He'd fought for Yaroslav the Wise in Kiev and Rus, served in the Byzantine Varangian Guard, and ruled Norway since 1047. His claim to England? A dusty agreement between Magnus of Norway and Harthacnut. Basically, if I die first, you get my stuff. Harald didn't care if the claim was weak. He had muscle, ships, and now Tostig. By late August, Harald set sail. His fleet landed at Cleveland, sacked Scarborough, and repelled local forces. He entered the Humber estuary, where Tostig and his Flemish mercenaries joined him. They sailed inland to Rickhall, then marched north toward York. Half the force moved ahead and met Edwin and Morcar at Fulford, just south of the city. The English formed up near Germany Beck, with the Ouse River on one side and boggy ground on the other. Morcar faced Tostig. Edwin faced Harald. Morcar, seeing his hated rival opposite him, charged, driving Tostig back. But Harald, the seasoned warrior, flanked Edwin, broke his lines, and wheeled south to crush Morcar's rear. Pinned between two forces, the English tried to escape through the marsh, only to be slaughtered or drowned. York surrendered on September 24th. Harald spared the city, took hostages, and returned to Rickhall. Tostig, riding high on revenge, was one step closer to his brother's throne. It was a year that would make even the gods sweat. 1066. The year England became a battlefield for 3 kings, 2 invasions, and one very exhausted monarch named Harald Godwinson. Word galloped south like wildfire. Harald Hardrada, the Viking titan, had landed in the north with Tostig Godwinson, Harald's exiled and vengeful brother. They had already crushed the local earls Edwin and Morcar at Fulford, and York had surrendered. Harald, who had spent the summer guarding the southern coast against Norman Duke William, had just disbanded his Fyrd, the part-time militia. But now, with the north ablaze, he grabbed his elite housecarls, rallied fresh Fyrd units along the way, and marched 190 miles from London to York in just 4 days. That's not a march, that's a medieval sprint. It was Monday, 25th September, and the sun was blazing. Expecting nothing but hostages and lunch, Hardrada let his men ditch their armor and stroll toward Stamford Bridge. Meanwhile, Harold's army had arrived in Tadcaster the night before, rested briefly, and by 9 a.m. they were in York, undetected. Harold, knowing the Norse were split between Rickle and Stamford Bridge, chose to strike Hardrada's force first. He took the Roman road via Gate Helmsley, and like a ghost army, the English closed in. Hardrada and Tostig, seeing the approaching force, were confused. Merchants? Diplomats? Nope, it was Harald Godwinson, and he wasn't here to talk taxes. A parley was arranged. Harald rode out with a small escort of housecarls. Since Hardrada didn't speak English, the brothers did the talking. Harald offered Tostig his earldom back and a third of England if he betrayed Hardrada. Tostig, ever the drama king, asked, "And what does Harald get?" Harold's reply? 7 feet of English ground or more, since he's taller than most men. Tostig refused. Loyalty over blood. Hardrada, sensing the tension, asked who the bold speaker was. Tostig replied, "My brother." Hardrada growled, "Had I known, I would have killed him on the spot." The battle exploded. The Norse held both sides of the bridge, but most were on the far side. As the English surged forward, one lone Norse warrior, a Dane axe-wielding colossus, held the bridge like a mythic guardian. He hacked through shields, mail, and men. 40 English warriors fell. The housecarls, impressed, offered him mercy. He refused. So, one clever Englishman crawled under the bridge and thrust a spear upward, ending the legend. Harold's men poured across. Hardrada had pulled his main force to high ground, forming a shallow shield wall, with flanks curled inward. He stood beneath his banner, Land Ravager, with Tostig at his side. But the Norse were outnumbered, under-armored, and overheated. The English broke through. Hardrada, in a berserker rage, charged with axe and sword, but was felled by an arrow to the throat, just as the sagas foretold. Harold offered mercy again. Tostig spat in its face, grabbed the Land Ravager, and fought to the death with his Flemish mercenaries. The blood price was staggering. But the battle wasn't over. Before the battle, Hardrada had sent riders to Rickle. Eystein Orr, leading the armored reinforcements, arrived late. Exhausted by the heat in their gear, they attacked in fury, a final, futile storm known in Norse tradition as Orra's Storm. They fought like demons. But it was too late. Harold had won, but at great cost. He chased the survivors to their ships and offered Olaf, Hardrada's son, mercy if he swore never to return. Of the 300 ships that brought the Norse, only 24 were needed to carry the survivors home. Harold buried his brother Tostig in York. A bittersweet end to a brutal family feud. But the gods weren't done with Harold. Just days later, he received word. William of Normandy had landed. And so, the battered king turned south to face his destiny at Hastings. Next up, the Battle of Lewes. Don't forget to follow, subscribe, and click the notification bell so you never miss another thrilling chapter of history brought to life. More intrigue, more battles, and more drama await.